Hi everybody, it's Ron again, and today we're coming to you from a hammock on the beach to give context and commentary to the headlines. Now you might say, isn't the news grave? Isn't it important? Shouldn't we be concerned about it? Doesn't one side of the political equation in the United States want us to go to battle for Trump and all of these ideas and scream and yell like they do in the Congress sometime? And doesn't the other side of the political equation want us to lay down our lives over global warming? And don't both sides have a lot to say about the Jews for or against these days? Isn't this something that concerns us all? And I think most of the time the answer is no. You got to be careful with alarmist headlines, and that's why I choose Trump. This is what is fed to the American public, and this is what a lot of news outlets across, especially the United States, look to for hot button issues that will be people will like and people will click on. And so my idea of sitting here in a hammock at the beach, I don't know if you can hear the waves, it's very calm today. It's to sort of show my contempt and show the separation that I think we must have from crazy, insane headlines and the siren call of politicians, of countries, of crazy movements to try to make us be a part of them and lay down our lives for them. So here we have, today in the news, we have Hezbollah leader threatens escalation. We've mentioned this the past days. This is the northern border with Israel that threatens to erupt into another front in the war to eradicate Israel and perhaps the Jews from Israel. And of course, Israel, probably quite rightly, in the same way after 9/11, one would expect the United States to kind of go crazy and invade a country over that. Countries have to respond to these sort of circumstances, and they're not likely to just accept a ceasefire. Israel is not likely to accept a ceasefire with Hamas. Hamas killed all those people and took all the hostages. It's not likely. Here we have Erdogan. I hear a lot of pronunciations, especially in the United States. It doesn't really care much about foreign names or pronunciations, but let's say the Turkish president supposedly is saying other things against Israel. However, we do know that some of these earlier statements that were trumped up, I believe, especially by this news source here, were something that the president of Turkey said at a rally. It wasn't sort of like an official position paper. It was a rabble-rousing statement for the masses. And this whole issue of Turkey, I talked about in one of the previous videos, I think about 4 days ago. I think that information about Turkey there is right in the title of the video. But, Turkey was, a very long-term, pliable member of the Western liberal democracy coalitions. It was a member of NATO. And now here we have Turkey reemerging as its own pole of power, doing things that are not aligned with the Western liberal democracies. They do their own incursions both into Syria and Iraq whenever they want to. And, they have a populist president who says things like this. And, they're also holding up, more entries into NATO after Russia invaded Ukraine. So this is a twist of a long-term ally in a very strategic location there. After many decades of it, who heard of Turkey in the past, but now we hear about it often. Why do young Americans support Hamas? TikTok. and they're dumb. Um, There's the same story from yesterday. The crypto guy lost a lot of money playing around with it. New speaker once blamed fall of Roman Empire on homosexual behavior. Uh, a lot of more crazier, really right-leaning people in the Congress these days, in the U.S. Congress. I think some of these beliefs, some of these right-leaning beliefs, in the same way as some of the left-leaning beliefs, some people have in their minds or in their hearts, but they just don't say it out loud. They're careful politicians, but we come in a he's coming to power in a time when there's a lot more polarization and acceptance of more unusual beliefs on the far right and the far left, and thus these beliefs are being said out loud, amplified by the media, and more people probably say, "Oh, well, I might believe in that too." Something more about Trump. Many of these articles are really on left-leaning media that are hanging on every word of Trump and showing how he's in deep trouble. Here we go. This is the New Republic. I just wanted to have this pop open, but my net's really slow. Very left-leaning, and if you read the prose in this article, it's obviously very gleeful and wanting you to know how deeply in trouble and how big a liars all the Trumps are. This was another crazy thing. These are more unusual, outspoken, and my net is slow. Guess that's what you get. I'm tethered here on my phone. Oh, here we go. These are just, maybe if you're in a certain mindset, you would want some more right-leaning people in Congress for whatever reason. But the behavior of these people, even among themselves, to call names in public and say nasty things and just be really, this is like unhinged Karen sort of talk, and I'm not sure that that's really necessary to obtain the goals that these right-leaning people want to do, want to accomplish. Something about Barbara Streisand. Here we have escalation in the South China Seas, with China fired a missile at a Canadian boat that was patrolling there. I'm sure that the Chinese would say, "Why are Canadian boats patrolling the sea right off of our country?" But the rest of the world and all the countries in the region, such as the Philippines and Vietnam, they would want that there because China has been rather boisterous in its activities in the South China Seas lately, claiming a huge swath, basically the entire thing, to the disadvantage of others. All of this is indicative of the idea that right now there are two big wars, and one way or another, the United States is involved in these things as an arbiter of international peace. And like it or not, they are the world policemen. They got military bases everywhere. They maintain all the sea lanes. Too bad other countries don't want to, but the U.S. taxpayer pays for that, or really it just goes on the debt. And so we have, Ukraine and Russia war, and we have Israel-Hamas war, which there are lots of factors there. With Iran, would love to get Hezbollah involved, make that as messy and complicated for the United States to fund that, to be involved militarily with that. The same in Ukraine. The United States has gotten in a big bundle there because they tried to bring in new members of NATO, and NATO itself is not united because of Turkey. And so here, what is the fear? The fear is what if there's a third major conflict, and it may be the great time for China to say, now is the time to forcibly take over all these little items and secure the South China Sea for us and kick out these other patrolling countries that are, patrolling in our backyard once and for all. And they would see in the United States probably, they see the idea in between Hamas and Israel where both the left and the right in the United States are fractured over condemning Israel, supporting Hamas, or vice versa. And that shows a split public, as in the past that they were more together on the idea of American hegemony in the world. And also we had the very chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan early in the Biden administration. So this tells foreign countries that the U.S. is not in a position to really want to get involved in any more foreign wars. And I believe, the security structure of Americans' defense is set, I believe, to be able to fight or be involved in two major wars or conflicts simultaneously. So there's a lot of fear that this is going to be a golden opportunity for China to do something. And they have their own internal struggles with the financing breakdown in the real estate sector and the demographic bomb of the aging population that is going to supposedly hurt their economy. So this is their once in a lifetime chance to maybe strike out, maybe hit Taiwan, maybe make their mark in the South China Seas. Navy launches missile from robot boat in the Middle East. This is all this new high-tech robot stuff is very fascinating. On one hand it's fascinating. On the other hand, we could have these remote control wars in the future where human life is not on the line, and you just send out this robotic stuff, and it might make it a lot easier to fight a war, and when there's nothing really on the line. Okay, here it is. I accidentally closed it. Well, it's one of those cool, sleek, modernistic things that will be fighting wars in the future. That's a picture we missed. You've seen them before. All kinds of weird stuff. Chimps use military-style tactics to gain advantage on rivals. I remember getting the old National Geographics in the day when they told about those stories when they were discovering how murderous chimps were. Humans always have this idea that nature's all sweet and wonderful. It's a natural state, and thus it's calm and peaceful. But no, it's just as violent as we humans are. So we're not an anomaly after all. Why is green sludge spilling onto the streets of Manhattan? A lot of pictures of this on social media. People mainly saying that this is water that is dyed with a green dye for tracking leaks, and that's what it is. But that article just was a bunch of men on the street comments and no information. But on social media, a lot of people say it's a green dye used in leakage and leak prevention. Great social media news collapse. This is a fascinating thing. I suppose this is part of what I'm doing here today in trying to find another way to look at the news and not be over concerned about the news and understand the news with context. This is how more and more people have given up looking at the news, reading the news, particularly apparently since the 2016 elections, where, before that, the news and social media was pretty wide open. You would have things that we might call disinformation out there in the public. It would be in in social media, uh, with different opposing views. They were just out there. And it seemed like, in the same way that Wikipedia comes to a sort of a consensus most of the time with a reasonable thing that a reasonable person would believe based on facts, in the same way, when people put out crazy claims, others would scoff at them. But and eventually kind of accept there's a certain reality to things. They're not different versions of the truth. But after the 2016 election, we started to have the social media platforms decide, perhaps, behind the scenes manipulation, that they would start to ban certain opinions, and on other opinions put a warning that this was misinformation. And this was supposed to be a better way of doing things. But um, I think what it led to was a lot of disillusionment that why are they hiding some opinions? So I'm not sure, but I think maybe in the fullness we'll find that, the free and open discourse, the ability to say anything you want in any way you want. Just drop my pillow here. Um, the ability to say anything you want, anytime you want, online, that open free speech, in most cases is preferable to some authority that could be manipulated by one political party or another. It's preferable to banning certain parts of speech. And of course, this became even more prominent during the epidemic situation where people who spoke out against masks or vaccinations or expressed any kind of opinions like that were just, you know, blacked out from social media. And I'm positing that perhaps that this has led to more polarization and more skepticism about the media. Uh, uh, Although I admit that people trying to censor things for one reason or another, especially that's happened in the past since 2016, probably was done mostly for reasons that were genuine to begin with. Um, and here we have the legacy news organizations that have been gutted by social media, all the free stuff online, and I mean, further, I would say they've been twisted by having to give opinions about um, things, because the way you get views online is you give some opinion, maybe some crazy twist on things, like talking about the news in a hammock at the beach. How does the New York Times compete with that? They've got to give their own opinions and give their own twist on the news, give their little take on things, which is different than the old style of being uh, impartial, maybe even disinterested, and just throwing down the facts. Um, this is obviously something I can go on and on about, and I have, and I probably will in the future. But this is a fascinating situation, and now with AI coming in to write all the stories, I mean, how can that even work? Because AI is just an amalgam of it's a garbage collection of other existing things. Until you have a reporter that goes out who's a robot and collects the data and interprets it and gives some context and commentary like I'm doing. How are you going to replace? How are you going to have AI write stories and just have some editor fix it up so it doesn't sound like it was generated procedurally? Here is something about a new Priscilla movie. Um, I just it's this Sofia Coppola directed thing. I don't know. The Drudge Report has a soft spot for Rex Reed, and so do I. I'm an old film student, film critic kind of a guy, and I like his even-handed and kind of critical, sometimes bitchy take on things, and I appreciate he's still around and still giving this kind of old school it's a 70s era idea of of critique where it's kind of films as auteur-driven things as a discrete piece of like literature. I like that take of those old critics, and Rex Reed is one of the last standing. Chaplin, Charlie Chaplin, and another thing, if you go back to the 70s and I'm growing up, Chaplin was still alive. I think he died in 77, and it just makes me think of my childhood and the fascination when you see all these modern media things you're watching, the garbage movies that the 70s was a garbage era for Disney movies. And there was nothing for kids, and then occasionally you see a Charlie Chaplin film, and it's a silent film, and it's wondrous, and it's timeless, and it's magical, and it has emotion, and it doesn't have to talk a lot to do that. It's thrilling. It's thrilling. So anything about Chaplin, I always stop and ponder the brilliance of that. But then, of course, in the modern days, we don't see Chaplin as an artist. We see him as some sort of a pervert. We only see artists in terms of what they do with their genitals. So even the Chaplin movie that I think Attenborough directed and Robert Downey Jr. did 30 years ago, great performance. He was nominated for an Oscar. Even that was not about Chaplin the artist. That was him as the pervert who liked very young wives. So in modern days, we can't really separate the artist from their genitals. Something about Bezos. I don't care. I'm jealous. Israel tells citizens don't travel anywhere. Jewish viewers find refuge in Fox. One of these days there'll be a whole show on just the way the mass media in the U.S. turned from being pretty impartial and to on both sides being lunacy, particularly Fox in the way they have discarded entirely any sense of impartiality. And people don't even expect that anymore. I mean, I've had people, to me say, you've got to take a side. I'm just talking about the news headlines, trying to give some context. Bring back the draft. This was something I was worried about when I was growing up, being drafted into the Army. And people joke in the United States when you have these millennial snowflakes, as they call them, the young kids who are overly coddled, who have to have trigger warnings on everything, who some identify as weird animals, not even as people anymore. It's a sort of a feeling that there's overindulgence. Now, I think at any time, the older generation looks at the younger generation and always thinks that. But here we have this idea that if, like I was saying before, what if the U.S. gets dragged into multiple wars? What if Russia nukes Kiev in the Ukraine? The U.S. would have to take action against them to try to dismantle their nuclear forces by force. They'd have to try to sink all their ships anywhere in the world, and then at the same time, the Middle East would erupt, and then China would say, "This is the perfect time. Let's take back Taiwan." Well, in this sort of maelstrom, which certainly seems more possible now than it ever has been before, why not bring back the draft and put a little strength of fortitude into these millennial snowflakes? So I suppose it just bespeaks of the serious time of the world we are in now, that people are discussing how you would bring back the draft. Can you imagine that? All these young men with their fingernails painted black. And I guess, to be fair, we'd have to draft all the girls too, with their side of their head shaved. And we'd just shave the whole head maybe. But I hope that doesn't happen. I hope that doesn't happen. I don't want more wars. Um, this is tremendously terrible, but also amazing. This is a theme park that Hezbollah made to show how much they hate the Jews. Now, Terror Parade inside Warped Hezbollah theme park, where terror-obsessed tourists wield machine guns and fake Israeli graves lie trashed. And I've traveled quite a lot through the Middle East, and I have friends in many countries, Egypt in particular. And let me tell you, from rank and file people you meet, they don't have any love for Israel and for Jews in general. And again, this is my anecdotal evidence, but I always found when you really talk to them, these Middle East guys will say, "Oh, well, we don't really hate Jews in general. It's just that if Israel were gone, disappeared from that region, and that we wouldn't have any. It's only because of the Israeli situation." So I don't know if that's really true or not, but in these countries they are fed a lot of hatred. So you see, this looks like something in a zoo, but inside it shows tanks left in Lebanon by Israeli forces. Somebody's trying to say something to me. Tourists wander through Commander's bunker in the theme park. It's replica graves. It's quite outrageous. I remember years ago, this was over 30 years ago, I was in Vietnam, and I went to the French-American War Crimes Museum, which was fantastic for an American to go to, quite amazing. And since they changed it into something else, they changed the name, and I think now it's completely dismantled, because obviously Vietnam, for quite a long time now, since the 90s, has really wanted to reestablish relations with the United States, because they have this giant of China who is bearing down on them. And even during the Vietnam War era, they were a lot more at odds than Americans thought, because we just see like all communists are together and are bad. So anyway, in the French-American War Crimes Museum, it mainly focused on the French, and they had the chicken cages where the people were put in cages, and there were chickens over them that would defecate down onto the prisoners. And the main thing they had with the Americans, if I remember, are the jars of baby fetuses and things that had supposedly been deformed from Agent Orange. So that, when I saw this, that reminded me of a sort of an ire that is expressed here in this very weird, scary Hezbollah exhibit. And I suppose in the West we kind of imagined that Israel was making peace with some of its neighbors, and the Palestinian issue could be put on the back burner, and it was not. And there is still a lot of very residual hatred in the world. That some of it, a lot of it is grassroots, but a lot of it is also, you have other nations in the region like Iran that have its own geopolitical reasons for trying to keep Israel on edge over these issues. Biden campaign warns very close general election. I do love primary elections, but I don't want to really talk and look at this until it gets a little closer and the things are whittled down a little bit more. But we're going into a very strange election cycle where the two front runners, Trump and Biden, a lot of people just can't believe they're going to end up running for the various reasons. Trump has legal troubles, and even a lot of Republicans are kind of fed up with maybe some of the errors, the self-inflicted errors, and Biden is obviously so senile that he's probably not live out another term, and thus you're voting for the Vice President, Kamala Harris. So That's why you already have a lot of news of challengers. So I said I didn't want to talk about the primaries. I'm already on it, so I'm going to get away from that. We'll wait for a few months until things get a little clearer. Um, uh, U.S. versus China in divided world economy. This is more about the different axis of powers that are growing in the world based on the big wars that are happening now. Um, and I would expect, a lot of companies, Apple that makes their phones there and all the American companies that exported their factories there in the past decades. You have to wonder, looking forward, whether you need to make other plans in other countries, maybe South Central America, maybe bring them back to the United States, because if there's some war and there are trade embargoes, or you're not able to have those freighters go back and forth across the Pacific Ocean to ship all that stuff to American consumers, business is going to be in turmoil. More economic costs, unemployment, blah, blah, blah. 75% of workers complete same work in 4 days could complete same work in 4 days rather than 5. Just don't tell the boss. Slow it down. Or slow it down even further. We'll need another week to finish that, boss. AI Whitney Houston, why is that interesting? Squatter shotgun stolen items. Some guy went in a national park and was squatting there. I don't know, I find that somewhat interesting. Like maybe you hark back to a young man and you think, if I just had a few cans of beans and a gun, and could I just live out in the woods somewhere and no one would know? Well, on that, all this negative news we had today, it ends on with me wondering about if I could go out in the jungle or something and live on my own with outside of society. Sometimes it does feel like that, doesn't it? So this was, let's see, I'm going to show you something if I can see here on the, no, that's not it. I wanted to show you the something about my book, but it's too bright here on the beach, so I won't. I do have a book. It's called There Are Still Unknown Places. It's on Amazon and Kindle, and it's my book of life and the interior struggles of people living in the modern city of Bangkok in this world of concrete that's both ancient and modern. You can check it out. If you read it, let me know what you think. So until next time, I'll see you for more headlines and context. See you then. Bye-bye.